Okay, folks. Hey, folks, it's your buddy Mike Messier. It is Thursday morning, I believe. Merry morning to you. This is One Pro Wrestling and Sports Fan YouTube channel, and I'm going to discuss the wonderful Vice TV running series, Who Killed WCW? It's produced by our buddy there, Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, and his ex-wife. I always find it interesting that it seems like, I could be wrong, but it seems like The Rock tries to downplay that his producing partner in a lot of these adventures he's on is in fact his ex-wife. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting that they've been able to have a working relationship together after being divorced, and good for them. That's very professional and all that. I think The Rock has been remarried since, and of course, he's helped his daughter there get work with the WWE and so forth. So good for him, good for them. This show, is it good for us? I mean, here's my thoughts on it, folks, and you're welcome to chime in if you happen to be catching this in live time. Like I said, it's Thursday morning. Um, I feel like it's just cliff notes to stuff that we've already heard. You know, we've already seen. If you're a wrestling historian, a wrestling enthusiast, a wrestling aficionado, a wrestling fan, to any degree, you've heard this story before, and I mean, I can tell you the sources, and they do cite their sources. Guy Evans' book, Nitro, which I first heard about on Eric Bischoff's podcast, 83 Weeks. It is a good listen. I did listen to the whole audio book of Nitro at least one time, probably got into it a second time. And it's a very good listen, and Guy is on this TV series, Who Killed WCW. Um, Speaking of podcasts, if you listen to 83 Weeks with Bischoff, Vince Russo has got some good opinions and insights onto this whole tragedy that is the final days of WCW. Kevin Nash, of course, has some good insights. He's done his podcast. All this information's been out there. I mean, this series is really just kind of a highlight reel, or like I said, a Cliff Notes version of stuff we already know, stuff we've already heard. I would say that it's very well edited. It's very slick. It's very nice looking. But I do think it's non-essential viewing. I mean, I don't think you would have to watch this show as far as the first two parts of it anyway. And there's, I believe, six parts that are going to be out in fruition. This is non-essential viewing. This is nothing that you haven't heard before. If you really want to hear the details, do Guy Evans' book, or actually read the hard copy and listen to those podcasts I mentioned. But in short, you know, as far as who killed WCW, I think that the answer they're going to come up with, we could see it coming already, is that it was a multitude of factors. You can't blame one individual. I mean, I could hear these sound bites in my mind already from Kevin Sullivan and everybody else. It wasn't just one individual. So many people had to mess up to kill WCW. And I do believe Bischoff. I know a lot of people have issues with Bischoff, and they say that he's a perpetual liar, and he always, you know, shines the light on himself and puts other people in the shadows. But I think Bischoff has done a good job over the years of copying to the mistakes that he made, things that he did that he shouldn't have done, and sometimes he kind of, you know, bowed into pressure, especially with running Thunder, the second WCW weekly show. He never wanted to do that. He said he felt pressure basically to keep his job and to make Ted Turner happy, and that he should have, you know, fought back and just said, look, this is going to oversaturate the audience with WCW programming. And so I think Bischoff is a pretty good source, and I do feel that between Eric Bischoff, Jim Ross, and anyone else, Tony Schiavone, that's talked about this stuff, I do kind of believe the narrative that the Turner executives and the Time Warner executives and the other people that were, you know, in on those upper echelon meetings, they just did not want WCW to be a part of Turner Broadcasting, and I do believe that narrative. I don't think there's much more to it than that. If you look at the last couple of years of ratings for Nitro, they were certainly paling compared to WWE's Raw. However, that their show, Nitro and Thunder, were still top-rated shows on not only TBS and TNT, but also all of cable television. So I do believe the story that it was really the inner workings of Time Warner, Turner Broadcasting, all those people just did not want this Nitro or WCW to be continued. And that's what happened. So I don't think we really need this series. It's a fun watch. It's a good rewind. But I'm going to pick apart some things in this series that maybe you noticed, maybe you didn't. There's some things in this show that I find that, in the interest of sound bites, in the interest of quick editing and telling as much of the story as they can in a very quick way, they are kind of doing the story not so much justice. And I'll give you some examples. There's a sound clip in episode 2 where Kevin Nash is talking about the writing of WCW and Thunder specifically. And he's talked about this at length in other shoot interviews. I think the Sean Oliver interviews. He's talked about how on the writing team, basically what they would do is you would have a Monday Nitro coming up, and then 2 or 3 days later you'd tape, you'd film live a Thunder, and then you would have another Thunder episode taped on that Thursday night after the live episode. And then they would go back to Monday Nitro the next week for a live episode of Nitro. So basically you'd have a live Monday Nitro. 3 days later you'd have a live Thunder. Then you would tape a Thunder and keep that in the can. And then the next week you'd have a live Monday Nitro. And then 3 days after that you would play the taped Thunder. So basically you would, in that 2-week span, you'd have one episode of Thunder that had to basically be very generic. No, if you could avoid title matches, and I think there's a way to do that. Basically, you just don't have title matches, and you don't have matches that are essential to feud development. On that second week of Thunder, basically you just have exhibition matches. But I think in the interest of television, they didn't necessarily always want to just have exhibition matches, whatever that means, just matches with no circumstances or nothing to do with storylines, just basic generic wrestling matches. So they would try to write, that live Monday Nitro before the taped Thunder. They would try to write that to have it go somewhere and have the payoff come with the taped Thunder. And I think that very difficult for anyone to do. If you're a wrestler or anyone, just bizarre, because like Nash has pointed out, the injuries in wrestling, maybe a guy is supposed to be there and doesn't show up, and then you have this pre-taped Thunder match that doesn't have the proper lead up on that live Nitro 3 days earlier. So it was a big mess. And like I said, the simple solution might have been just to keep those Thunder matches on week 2, the pre-taped Thunder matches, keep them very generic, keep them very non-essential. However, then you're writing a crap show and everybody would see through it. So I don't think there was a good solution. And I think Kevin Nash points that out pretty well. And you might be wondering, well, why did they do the pre-taped Thunder? Basically because they were having a hard time selling tickets for Thunder every week. So I guess they were starting to lose money, on those Thunder tapings. So there you have that. I'm trying to get back to my notes here, folks, in case you're wondering. I'm sure you are. You're wondering, what's he doing? I'm trying to get back to my wonderful notes, because I actually wrote notes down for this. And of course, I can't fucking get to them when I'm trying to, so that's upsetting me. God in heaven. Just so sick of passwords for everything. You know what I mean? Okay, let's move on. What else? The butts and seats line, I noticed, if you saw week 2, unless I missed something, basically Tony Schiavone is talking about, they're talking about the famous time, the finger poke of doom going against the Mick Foley Rock title match. I believe the Foley Rock match, I want to say it was taped December 28th, 1998 in Worcester, Massachusetts, and then it was basically broadcast, I think it's January 2nd or January 3rd of 1999. And that went up against the finger poke of doom, and of course Eric Bischoff demanded that Tony Schiavone go on Nitro in his commentary duties and basically spoil the result of Raw and tell the fans, hey, if you're going to watch Monday Night Raw, you're going to see Mick Foley, who used to wrestle here as Cactus Jack, win the world title from The Rock. That'll put butts in seats. So the whole tagline, the whole point, the whole bullet, the punchline on that anecdote is Tony Schiavone insulting Mick Foley and in turn insulting Mick Foley's fans and saying butts in seats. That, sarcastically saying that Mick Foley winning a title, world title, will put butts in seats, demeaning Mick Foley, demeaning Mankind, demeaning Cactus Jack, and the legacy that he had throughout the world of wrestling, and especially in WCW. And that whole thing is lost because they basically edited out the butts in seats line. So it's kind of like, what's the point of telling this anecdote? They basically go through the whole story of the famous butts in seats story without giving you the butts in seats line. Now, some of this stuff, folks, it might seem like minuscule, but it's kind of like, if you're going to break out the hits, with this whole storytelling of what killed WCW, the butts in seats story without the actual butts in seats line, it's, who killed WCW? Who killed WCW? Who killed the documentary of WCW? I think what's kind of restraining this series is in the nature of trying to get all this story crammed into 6 45-minute episodes. They are sacrificing some of the nuances and some of the details, and in this case, really the whole point of that particular anecdote, which is butts and seats. Now, maybe I missed it. Maybe they did play the butts and seats line. I didn't hear it, and it seemed like even if they did say it, which I don't think they didn't emphasize it to my liking. So I don't get it. I mean, and I think there was some other things. I'm trying to remember exactly what, but I think there was some other examples from the first episode, which were like, you're not quite nailing, like you're not quite sticking the landing on whatever particular anecdote they're telling. Let's see what else here, folks. Yeah, I mean, this series to me is really feeling like just rehash. It's rehash for the smart marks like myself, like yourself. It's just more of the same things we already know. To give them credit, and I haven't even watched this full series, but I know for years and years, the WWE Network had that Monday Night Wars series, which I think if you wanted to watch that, you would probably get more out of that. But here's another hot take, folks. I think we've been lamenting as a collective, the wrestling fans, myself, yourself. We've been worried about this, WCW Monday Night Wars. We've been thinking about it for too long. We're pushing 30 years now, guys. So I think it's time we all get over it. It was a great time to be a wrestling fan. Most of the wrestling fans at this point probably weren't even alive for this stuff, or were too young to remember it, or it's at the very beginning of your wrestling memories. And it was a great time, but I think if you look at what's going on now, and I'm guilty of this myself, I'm not paying attention to everything these days, but stuff with NXT and TNA doing stuff together, Cody Rhodes, you have Swerve Strickland in AEW, you have, a bunch of stuff going on in the pro wrestling current day, that if people paid attention to that as much as we did to this 30-year-old Nitro stuff, you know what I mean? But there is a sweet spot there to give it credit, that Attitude Era. A lot of us would like to go back in time and live there forever. You know what I mean? Live in 1997 forever, or 1998. But the reality is, folks, Father Time is undefeated. We all get old. We all die. And, it's just not what it was. But I just don't know if we really needed this series, but here it is. We're watching it and we're analyzing it, and it's worth watching, but it's definitely flawed. And I do find with Vice, I do like Vice's shows. I do like how Vice does things, but they always seem to leave a little bit on the table. Like it's not like it's not a particularly tight show. It's not like I feel like saying 60 Minutes or something like that, where they cover all the bases, and it just feels like it's kind of thrown together sometimes, and that sometimes with shows on Vice, they don't always get the full story. They're very aware of getting things on the air quickly, and they're very aware of the quick editing, and as people are now with short attention spans, like keeping your attention with fast moving edits and sound bites. but I do feel like the truth sometimes gets sacrificed. So that's it, folks. So this is my response. This is my review. I think it's worth watching, but it's not essential viewing. I mean, out of 5 stars, I'd probably give parts 1 and 2 3, mostly for the editing and the fun. There's some also other things in here, folks. I mean, the Bill Goldberg stuff on episode 2. I mean, I'm a very anti-Goldberg guy. I think every time Goldberg talks, he kind of just buries himself. He's just so self-centered. Never gave back to the business, never gave back to anybody. I mean, I do like the fact that he's done the charity work for kids and everything, but I think a lot of wrestlers do that and they don't put a parade in their own honor for doing that type of charity work. But I do think Goldberg, he just, he's like one of these athletes, one of these, shoot athletes, football players that never quite understood what he was doing with wrestling and just always thought it was like he actually deserved all these credentials. And if you really look at the physique of Goldberg, I mean, I think that's a part of what got him over was his look. You could look at a guy like Brian, not Brian Adams, but the other Brian Clark, from Mortis and Wrath and the tag team that he was in, Chronic, Adam Bomb. I mean, he could have been Goldberg. He could have had the same trajectory, I think. I don't think Goldberg was that good. I think it was everyone around Goldberg that made Goldberg look good. Kevin Nash had a similar physique. 10 years before Goldberg, the Road Warriors, Nikita Koloff. I mean, all these guys. Not all of these guys. Not every single wrestler was as intimidating or as physically imposing as Bill Goldberg. But I think enough guys were, I don't think Goldberg brought a lot to the table, and I didn't think that way then, and I don't think that way now. I mean, Nord the Barbarian, John Nord, I mean, the Warlord, so many guys. I just feel that Goldberg he has more respect for himself than he does for the business. He has more appreciation for himself than I have for his career, and I just don't get it. And the fact that the WWE trotted him out, not only in 2003, but they trotted him out, 5 or 6 years ago, 2018, 2019, and had him beat Kevin Owens and had him beat Brock Lesnar in 38 seconds. I mean, it's just absurd. And it's absurd that, some of the fans cheer this guy, and it's just shame on you. So that's it, folks. Those are my thoughts. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them. But I've got plenty of nice. Yes, what a wonderful shirt. This shirt is available to the public on the Foreign Object Spreadshirt page. I think you can get that internationally. But if you have any comments on my comments, you can leave them or not. It's a free country. MikeMessier.com. Have a good Thursday, everybody.